The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Articulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yackzan. I'm a core alignment coach, which means I coach executives, leaders, and organizations to align their actions with their values. I'm also an emotional wisdom training specialist, supporting people to use the wisdom of our emotions and find healthy ways to express them and yet not be ruled by them. And I have for decades been a diversity educator and fortunate enough to work with many, many people from many backgrounds and who live in many different places. And I am very excited tonight to have two people who have been my guests before. But today we are celebrating International Women's Day. And I'm so excited to honor these two women. There's so many more women to honor that we can all think of. And I just want to say the title of the show, we're calling it Celebrating Passionate Leaders, Uplifting Girls, Women, and Everyone Around the World. I've learned a great deal from both of these guests. Possibly we'll have a third guest coming in, joining the show at some point. But let me first introduce, and DJ, our wonderful engineer in the background, could you please bring Sara out first? Sara is a family therapist. Dr. Sara Ruebelt is a family therapist and a multicultural specialist. And Heidi Randall is our second guest, who is the executive director of an amazing organization called Maine Boys to Men, which the purpose of which is courageously committed to ending male violence and self-harm while advancing gender equity. Welcome, Sara and Heidi.
Thank you, Bahia, for that introduction. Happy Wednesday to all of you.
Yes, big day, big day. It's been nice seeing some emails and texts going around the world, celebrating women and the hard work we do. So I wanted to give Sara a chance to talk about what you do as a family therapist, and I'm sure she'll be right back. Anybody, viewers watching, know she had to step away. And well, how about this, Heidi? Since Sara's had to step away, hello, welcome. Please tell us about yourself and what you do.
Thanks so much, Bahia. I really appreciate this introduction and this opportunity to gather with women and to talk about sort of the many barriers that we currently face around gender equity and the things that we're doing to mount those obstacles and overcome those. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. And it looks like Sara's back. So I will give her the floor.
There was a pager going off in the background. I took care of
it. Thanks, Heidi. So Sara, please share with us what you do. I know you do many things, but give us an idea of who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Bahia. Again, happy International Women's Day to all amazing women in the world. All of the women who make this world a better place. I'm Sara Ruebelt. I'm a family therapist, very passionate about cross-cultural understanding, building bridges between people of all minority groups, ethnic groups, cultural backgrounds. It's just my passion in life to make those bridges, and it's an honor to dedicate my work, my research, my advocacy, and social justice work towards that. I think as the current situation that you saw, us women wear many hats. We do many things. And it's amazing sometimes when I meet women and we just have a heart to heart chat about all that we are doing at the same time, simultaneously, sometimes working through day to day, taking care of the people in our lives that we love, but also be the voice of the people who are not having that voice, the voiceless. I'm also Iranian American, and so today, especially, I want to take a moment to honor the women of Iran who are fighting for their freedom, women life freedom, as the movement and the revolution that's taking place. And yes, I'm inspired by what's happening. I'm amazed, courage. And I have been dedicating so much of what I do in terms of being their voice, and voice of all women in the world. Because until every one of us have freedom and have the ability to live freely, in some ways, none of us are free.
That is so true. So can you give us some like ways that you are able to support women in Iran and Iranian women in America?
Yes,
Because from a distance, it's a different thing.
definitely, definitely. It's extremely difficult to generalize all the experiences that Iranian women are having currently. If women are living in Iran, they're faced with so many laws and regulations that take away their rights. Women in Iran cannot hold certain jobs or positions. They are not allowed freedom of expression, freedom of even what they wear. And not having or having forced hijab laws, for instance, certainly puts that inequality in its place because there is no it takes away the choice. So women in Iran have been really fighting to push that boundary and to say this is not okay. And because of it, many have been, I mean, the arrests that have been happening just because of the demonstrations for freedom is devastating. But lives lost. People have been murdered and killed and persecuted and put in prison. And this is the most heartbreaking aspect of this reality, that in order to gain freedom, so much atrocities are happening and so much lost life is taking place. But they are not going to give up because this is a fight worth fighting for. And the women here are obviously grieving because there is that survival guilt, the feeling that we have freedom here in the West, but they don't. And yet they are our sisters. We feel what they're feeling. Those of us who are empaths and really can empathize the experience of the trauma that they're faced with. And we want to do what we can on our end to be their voice, to advocate for them, and to let the world know what's going on. Because I think the main devastation here is that while this is going on, the world is not seeing it for the reality that it holds, and that solidarity is what they actually need more than anything from us. The understanding and the support, emotional support, but also being their voice, advocacy.
And you're supporting Iranian women here in America too, through the.
Yes, many of the women here are feeling grief, feeling vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, um, are reminded of what I think, again, multi generationally, they've been affected because this has been going on for almost 44 years. And the families, each person has a story, a tale to tell in terms of how their families have been impacted by the regime in Iran and the dictatorship that really the forces of the many rights that are taken away and the feelings of um, just fear and anxiety and stress that's caused by having to worry about safety, worrying about people's livelihood and their rights being taken away, or imprisonment, or, you know, people getting killed. It's really devastating. And so my goal is to create a support system for those women to be um, united. In unity, we stand stronger. I attended a Iranian Women's Leadership Conference, and in that conference, the conversation was all about unity and, how we can support one another. And I feel like, in the spirit of the International Women's Day, that message really resonates again and again. That in unity we are stronger. And as women, we support so much of our community. The people that we love, matter to us. And there's so many things that we do in spirit of advocacy. And of course, our self-care is also important. And how we can create that balance between doing as much as we can, but also hold on to our, you health and our spirit, our mind, body, wellness, so that we can continue doing all the wonderful things we do in this world.
I so appreciate that. And I know Heidi does too. Thank you, Sara. So Heidi, I love that Heidi brings in a whole new, how should I say, other half of the world into this work. So please share with the listeners and viewers and Sara more about what you do and how you came to the work with young men, boys, and boys to men.
Yeah, thank you, Bahia, and thank you, Sara. So let me just start with a little bit about who we are and what we do. So our mission is to end all forms of male violence and self-harm while advancing gender equity, which, when I think about, the things that you spoke about, Dr. Sara, I reflect on really what we're working to do at Maine Boys to Men is to disrupt the dominant story and the dominant programming in our culture, which is local, national, and global, that to be a man, to be successful in the male identity, is to assert power, aggression, and violence over others. And what we see too often in our local, national, global culture is that power over others is elevated and by men. And when men display that behavior, they're actually oftentimes given status, rewarded, allowed to hold positions of power, celebrity status, all these sort of things. And the damaging effect that narrative and that dominant story has on young boys growing up, and on people in our culture, particularly anyone who doesn't sort of identify. I would say it's harmful to men as well. But really, the targets of male aggression is often women. And so the harmful effect of the way that men perform their gender to seek status and value from other men is by harming women. And so really what Maine Boys to Men does, we seek to kind of flip that paradigm and disrupt that dominant story and that dominant sort of programming that boys get it from such a young age, like the constant messaging, right? Like, be a man, don't cry, use violence to solve problems. Like, look at the men through history who've gone to war, who have, pushed their pain aside, who have, done all of these things, who have harmed other people and been given sort of value and status in our culture for that. And we're really, through all of our trainings and all of our curriculums, we start with, middle school age boys. We work with all genders in high school. We work with new fathers. We think that fatherhood is a really important crossroads in disrupting. Oftentimes fathers will pass down really harmful messaging about what it means to be a boy, what it means to be a man, to their young children. And that's one of the places where we seek to really disrupt that continuation of that narrative or that story. So we have programs. We're primarily a youth serving organization, but we also work with adults who serve youth in hopes that we can train them to also change the way the messages that they give young boys about what it means to be a man in our culture and what gender equity really looks like and how important that is, for all people. So that's a little bit about what we're doing, and we're a small but mighty organization, I like to say, and it's such. I think that every year it's tough for us to keep our lights on and to keep the programming running and the funding coming in, but every year, our board and our staff and our community, the schools that we work in we're in very high demand to come and work in schools, to teach others our work. And I often say in our training events, like I would bet there's no one else in the world having this conversation right now, the one that we are having about disrupting the patriarchy, like disrupting this dominant messaging. And I think it's so important with social media and movies and music, and that young people are getting so much messaging that this is the way it's supposed to be for men, that to play a role, to be a man in the world means to harm others, and I just think that's really, really important for us to disrupt that in any way we can. So that's really, what we're doing here and the work that we're doing. And we're started something called our Training Institute, where we basically give our curriculum to other people and we train them how to use it, so that we can go from working with thousands of boys a year to working with hundreds, other people sharing our work, so that hundreds and hundreds of thousands of boys will be impacted as well. I like to say that I kind of cut my teeth in this work by I did 10 years working for a domestic violence organization here in Maine, and started the first ever youth violence, dating violence prevention program. And I just feel I loved that work, and I loved working with women and children and helping them find safe homes and safe communities to live in through legal services and sheltering and all those things. But at the end of the day, what I really wanted to do was change the root causes of male violence, and to really end, to work on the side of ending the behavior that's harmful to women, versus trying to help women, on the other end of it. So that's really how I came about working in this field, and have come sort of full circle. That was many, decades ago now, but I just feel like it's so rewarding. And one of the reasons why I feel like it's so rewarding is that when we work with young boys and boys in high school, and we start having these conversations with them, it's literally the first time anyone has given them permission to even consider that there's a different way of being and a different way of thinking about their identity as a male and their place in the world. And I literally watch them in the room, just a sense of relief come over the room, where I feel them just like putting down, these societal expectations and these constructs that they don't want to carry around either. I think that's the thing that often gets lost in this dialogue, is that, when young men are growing up and forming their own identities and their purpose and place in the world, they don't think, oh, I want to be someone who's going to be harmful to other people. That's not our nature as human beings. And yet, all the messages keep telling them to go against their own innate nature as a human being. And so what's wonderful about our programming is it really gives young boys and men, and those who serve young boys and men, permission to be like, we don't buy into that anymore. Like, we don't want to participate in that. And that's really the core of what we do, and why I love my work so much, and why I stay committed to it, even though we have lots of obstacles every year, problems to solve and how to keep it going. And it seems like swimming up the river sometimes, but it's really important, even if we are, one of the smaller voices. I think it's important that we're out there and we're sharing that message.
I so appreciate this work and the brilliance behind going to the root causes, and just like reading like testimonies on your website and watching the videos and just the little snapshots I get. I can just feel the relief that the boys and young men are getting, like huge, just the pressure lifted, and the testimonies of like, oh my God, I can be human. Thank you so much. And just, that makes all of us just as happy as when there's another woman feeling safe and feeling her own power. And it's just, I'm so glad you want to replicate it, and you will, because it is needed everywhere. I didn't even tell Heidi that I've been emailing her office trying to figure out how to get them from out to the West Coast. This work is just so incredibly valuable. And Sara, do you want a chance to respond to what you just heard from Heidi?
Heidi, I really find that to be very meaningful what you're doing, because I think as a therapist that relationship between how the genders play a role and the impact they have, and yes, today's International Women's Day, but every man out there can relate to having women in their lives, right? Whether that's a mother, a sister, a significant other, or and I feel like the feminine energy in men also be celebrated. And one of my earliest publications with the professor had with the feminist male therapists, the male therapists who identify as being feminine. And I tell you, what a profound analysis that was, interviewing these men who were inspired by their lives and were spreading, energy, wanting to be like that, and as a man to have, so many things that are identified as I guess values of women or female, and to say no, that's not just for a female, it's also for me. Like, I am empowered by that. I want to empower other men to be like that. And I feel like that's that bridging that our world actually needs when we think of gender equity, and when we think of the connection, the unity of us uniting together and no longer having these barriers that separate us as entities, make us feel as one. That unity has so much to offer in this world. And so any organization that's promoting that and is, inspiring others to look through that lens and to, in a way, deconstruct. Our realities are socially constructed, and we need to sometimes deconstruct and reconstruct them so that they can be more meaningful and have a greater impact. So thank you for all that you do.
Yes. I want to turn to a question that Sara mentioned would be good to share, which is like, how do you support women or men, but in this context of International Women's Day and all the violence against women, how do you support women to partake in their own communities as pillars of strength, even against like the incredible odds of death threats, like you mentioned, people dying to ask for really basic rights. And so just how do we, I think the way you put it, Sara, was while empowering them to take care of themselves, how do we support people to be pillars of strength? Yes. And also take care of themselves?
I appreciate you bringing that up, Bahia, because it is that balance, I think, is so incredibly important. I I look at things, I use a lot of frameworks that give meaning as to how things can be made sense of. And I love Gretchen Rubin's work in terms of identifying the way we meet expectations in the world. And she talks about four different possibilities. She talks about, being an upholder, you meet the expectations of others, and you meet the expectations you put on yourselves. And obligers, they meet the expectations of others really easily, but they have a hard time meeting the expectations they put on themselves. And I meet a lot of women that fall in that category of wanting to take care of everybody around them who has needs and not meeting the needs of themselves. And by that, again, this sort of, almost self-sacrificing energy that's produced. And
Mhm.
often it's promoted, I think, for women to be that loving, nurturing beings. And there's something so profound about that that's so innate and natural. Um, at the same time, when we overdo it, we can really harm ourselves, and we can, sort of not recognize the balance. So I promote that balance so much because I think that there is profound potential in making a difference in the world. And I think that that level of caring, compassion towards one another can also be a reminder for women to when they see women who are in role of leadership, or they're doing as much as, giving so much, to also be the voice in their ears that says, take care of you too, or we're here for you too, or to give each other that support to create synergy. Because I think far too often I see so many women who give, until there's just nothing left. Of course, when we think of the women in Iran, this is it's such a shift in terms of comprehension of what the reality holds. The reality there is that life almost doesn't even hold meaning anymore to many of them, unless they do this fight for rights, and to fight for the justice and human rights to exist in their society. And so for them, I think they really are putting that at the forefront. And many men, whether it's their brothers, fathers, spouses, they are getting behind that because they agree that this is not okay. Um, but yes, the balance of connecting to how much we are doing and how much we're also preserving that so we can continue doing that, because this fight could be a long, it's just something that needs to continue. And we see so many people who self-sacrifice, and there is harm that's caused as a result. So keeping that balance is extremely important, and getting support and making sure that there are other people in their lives that help them and encourage them and empower them.
Thank you. Heidi, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I think about some of my own experiences and the women around me, and in my life. And I think about the important two things come to mind. One is to do the thing that helps you reset, whether it's meditation or a few minutes outside breathing, but that brings you back to remembering like who you are, and that we are all, these divinely sourced beings in the world with infinite power and possibility to make change. And for me, that's meditation. And just even a few minutes can just help me remember that I have supportive nature. I have that source within me that will guide me in the most right directions, no matter what's happening around me. And I get to bring some of that, organized intelligence back with me every time I take a break. I get to bring that break, what I get from that, back out into my work, to my family, to myself. And that looks different for everyone, and support whatever that looks like for everyone. And then the second thing I would say to women is to lead, like to lead, and not from a place of impersonation or not from a place of imitation, not from a place of seeing how other people, or men are leading around you and feeling like you've got to adapt your style to fit in so you will be heard. Just lead from your own authentic, centered place, voice. And every time I have done that, it just has worked really, really well for myself and my community. And even when I was applying to become the executive director after being in a different position within the organization, I really didn't I didn't want to lead. There was a part of me that was like, not me, and I had another female identified friend really show up and said, like, no, like, you, like, step up, do it, and I'm so glad, that she did, because it was just, a bunch of dumb thoughts in my head that said, you can't do this. And one of my board members recently at a meeting, we do appreciations at the end of our board meetings, and we take some time to appreciate each other. And he had said that he observed me in a meeting with my team, which is it's primarily male identified folks on my team. And he'd never seen a leader interact with their team in a way where they really listened and they really took in what people were saying, and they really heard their ideas and they really incorporated them, and they weren't just trying to like push. And that's not to like, puff myself up, but that's to say, like, that is a very different leadership style in our culture when leading a team of people. And that is a very feminist-based, consciousness-based model of leadership. And we need so much more of that, in the world. And I learned that from, I spent 10 years in a feminist-based organization right out of college. And like, I learned how to be heard, and I learned how to listen to other people. But I only know how to do that because I was listened to, and by others. And so I would say to women, like, go to the place that resets yourself as often as you can and lead strong in our culture. Like, we need feminist-based, consciousness-based leaders in our world who are female identified. So that's what I would say.
Lead strong.
Go for it. Go for it.
That's awesome. What a great direction. Like, not telling us how to say, just lead your authentic self, and not impersonating, not imitating. Just lead the way you do know how to lead inside of you. Just allow it and support it and voice it. Thank you. I have to shout out.
As you are leading through this talk show, and as you are.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Back at you. I want to shout out Kavita Gurung right now. You're both reminding me of her, one of our guests who didn't make it because she had constantly working, as you mentioned, constantly taking care of so many issues. She's got, speaking of uniting, 20,000 plus women in Nepal. And I think there may be another location, but more than 20,000 women together. And if I say the name, I used to be fluent in Nepalese. Let me see if I can remember the name of her organization. Mahila Shakti Bikash Kendra Nepal. And that is translated to Women's Power Development Center, or Women's Power Center. And I love the word, that power is right in there. And I love also, I have to also shout out a dear friend who I met in the Peace Corps Nepal, Kathy Shrestha, who translated that for me because she's still fluent in Nepalese. Thank you, Kathy. And Kathy pointed out Shakti can also mean energy. But that name itself, I think names are so important, and they just sort of call out of us action, our strongest selves. And so whether you interpret the meaning power or energy, it just, I feel like you're both speaking to that. And I just want to also just shout out Kavita Gurung for the incredible work she's doing, and her one of her great supporters, Maria Santangelo, has a sister organization called Amachuri, which means mother-daughter in Nepalese. And they both wanted to be here with us today. But thanks for reminding me of that, both of you.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said, Heidi. It was so profound when you talked about that, coming from that authentic self, as Bahia mentioned just now. You know, it's that that's where the power lies. I think that's where the power within us speaks the truth and leads the way. Because based on our observations, based on what we see, our communities need, wanting to kind of facilitate an opportunity for things to be addressed instead of swept under the rug or repressed or put away, compartmentalized or avoided. You know, forget about avoidance, engagement, doing things because they are needed and being the voice when it's needed to be heard from the mountaintop, shouted out because it's necessary, and no more silence, no more trying to fit the box, no more trying to be approved or validated. I think it's just it's about breaking barriers and letting that, as Brene Brown would say, you know, that authentic self, that power of vulnerability to lead the way. So thank you. That really resonated with me.
Yes. So I want to this question is going to lead into how you each take care of yourselves, and I just want to give a little bit of context, regardless of any kind of view you might have. But given that right now we're experiencing a lot of, in my opinion, some real serious backsliding of basic human rights in America, which, despite all of our faults, and we definitely still are seen as a leader to many other countries in the world and people in the world, because so much has happened when there's so many different people here, and I think the more we acknowledge our history and recognize the traumatic historical history of committing near genocide, recognizing the atrocities of enslaving other human beings, and the more we know our history, the more we help each other acknowledge it, the more we just get more intelligent. We use our heart intelligence, we use our compassion, we use our insight. We learn not to repeat mistakes. In general, I do certainly believe America is progressing forward. But just for one example, this whole idea of women in America in many different states, and more threats to our ability to have choice over our own bodies is still so shocking and stunning. The push to be revoked, and I really believe it's a small minority of people who are right now just really off balance, maybe interested in power and controlled, not connected to their true authentic selves, who are kind of temporarily leading this. But it's really hard. It's really difficult. And I've had a couple of shows with doctors about the reproductive choice, and how much human life depends on having that choice, how it's a medical intervention, how necessary it is medically for so many reasons that most of us don't even know unless we've experienced it, or or in the field or something. So given that right now the three of us do live in the United States and have relative privilege compared to so many women in other parts of the world, not everywhere, but majority, how do you take care of how do you cope? I was trying to find another word besides cope, but what do you do with the fact that when something just hits you hard about a loss of a right in a society that is supposed to be freer than most in the whole world, that just slamming down a chunk of a chunk of our population, and and anybody who cares about women, right? So I don't know which one of you want to take this first, but that's just an example of like, that one is just sort of, for me, like hard to keep. I have to keep renewing myself and regaining faith. That's just one example of an area where I have to go like, we we march on. We can do this. We know how to do this. We've been through this. Many people have been through worse than this. But anyway, so I don't know if which one of you wants to take that first.
I can.
Whether it's about that example or another example of how do you renew yourself.
Yeah, I can lead the way, and Heidi, maybe you can follow. But I'm passionate about this topic, and very similarly, again, I identify as an Iranian American who was born in Iran but raised here in the United States, very bicultural. Definitely feel like this is my country. I am a citizen of the United States, and this is, where I vote. This is where I work, and the community that I have the most impact is here. However, looking over my shoulder to my home birth country, looking at what's going on, how women of Iran are, facing bullets and arrest and, um, you know, risking their lives, fighting for basic human rights, I think awakens my senses as to what we have here and how important it is to preserve and protect it more than ever, and get inspired to stand up for those rights, because yes, very very easily they can be taken away. And we have to be the voice. As you mentioned, Bahia, people have specific realities that the circumstances speak for themselves as to why they need these rights. And just because as a woman that hasn't happened to me yet, it doesn't mean that I can't understand or comprehend another woman in that circumstance and what it is that they need and how their rights could be taken away if they don't have that choice. And so I think that's back to amplification of voices, standing up for all the various circumstances and situations where women are affected, and making sure that those rights are not taken away, and that we unite and stand together, because I think it's not going to be an easy battle if people don't speak up about those circumstances in which people will be impacted tremendously, right? If a woman is raped, if a woman is in a circumstance where their own medical, like their own health is at risk, and why can't people have choices to make that best and decision for themselves? Why should another entity like a government have that choice for them? It's just, that's, I think, where I see that relationship with, again, looking over my shoulder and seeing what's going on in Iran and looking at what's going on in the United States. I see parallels. Yes, the level of fighting and the rights are different, but it's the same theme, and that theme has to be strongly advocated for, and all of us need to contribute.
Thank you. Preserve and protect the rights we have and amplify voices collectively. Thank you so much, Sarah. Heidi.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is that I am unapologetically outspoken about bodily autonomy, right? For children, for, women, for people, for human beings. And I think that for some reason it's become culturally accepted to be like small with our voices and don't upset people that are around us. And like, I will share the things on Instagram and Facebook and social media, and I will, no matter what my role is in a community, I will be strong and outspoken and elevate, this idea that this is basic human rights that we're talking about. And I am relating it very clearly to male power. And I think people are afraid to make that connection. I don't understand it, because it is the only connection. And it's everything. It's all about male violence. Like, it's basically taking, a male violent culture taking bodily autonomy away from women. I mean, it's so obvious, but no one's saying that. And so I will unapologetically like make that connection for people. And our organization came out with a very strong statement on Roe v. Wade. And then, I mean, then the flip of that is that I bring love and I bring light, and I'm running to flip the script and flip the narrative. So, every chance I get, I'm trying to elevate the alternative, right? Because I think that, as we know through social media, people's channels of information become very narrow. And so I'm always sort of like posting or talking about ways that other countries, elevate women and support women's rights, and to put out the possibility for people who maybe can't even think outside of the narrow framework of what's happening in our country. So I'm like trying to bring that love and that narrative. And then lastly, like I am intentionally joining global communities. Like I'm a part of the global transcendental meditation community. I'm a part of a global, graduate program. I'm following people on social media. My nutrition coach is in Germany. Like I think it benefits us all when we see that the world is much bigger than what's happening, here in the United States, and that we're sort of like being fueled by other people and in other places in the world. And seeing our commonality and unity. And that's one thing that's really helping me, is to see my place, in the world as bigger, and that I belong to many communities in the world, and that I can, gain strength and borrow hope from other people when things aren't so hopeful for us.
Wow. Thank you for making that connection, more than one, but the connection to male violence and flipping the script and flipping it with love and light. And also reminding us to break out of our isolation that we can so easily be stuck in. And we have very little time, but I still want to do quickly, if you can each, I don't know, take 45 seconds to say, like, what would the world look like? What will the world look like when we have gender equity?
I think, if I may
Yeah.
lead that one first, I think that Heidi brought a really good point. I often identified myself as a citizen of the world, and particularly pursuing the multicultural specialty in my field and cross-cultural bridging and understanding. It comes from that the world is, ours, and no boundaries, no bounds. We are all humans, and humanity, is there to connect us, and we can relate to one another. And so when I think of equity, I think of more of the same. That equality, that identification crosses all race, ethnicities, culture, language. The multitude of all of this is what makes our world so enriching and so meaningful and so powerful. Together, we really are stronger. So, removing these barriers, the unity really is not just some utopia that we dream of. It is possible. If we envision it, it is possible. And we need to challenge ourselves and raise the bar to empower every one of us to think and to see through that lens, and to stop allowing, systems and structures to get in between that unity, whether that being religion, whether that being dictators and governments and politics. These are all structures that are systemically getting in the way of that unity, and those barriers must be removed. And I am outspoken about that very much, because I just see so many of these structures and barriers pulling us away, polarizing our society, our communities. That polarization is
I like
exactly
it.
what we don't need. So yes.
Well, thank you. We just have to have let's get Heidi's closing thought. Thank you so much, Sara. That was beautiful. Let's remove the barriers, walk through them. Heidi.
I think gender equity is, it's freedom, and with freedom comes all possibility. So it's leaves no one out, and it helps us solve problems together, and really, literally, is the biggest shift that could happen, for for our global community is the freedom for people to live into their fullest expression of themselves. And only good things can come in all spheres from that freedom to live into your highest possibility. So, I mean, who doesn't want that?
And it goes back to when, none of us are free until all of us are free. We will all be liberated. We will all be so liberated. So I need to close my own thought here. Thank you both so very, very much. Thank you, DJ, the sound engineer. Thank you, our producer. Thank you, Kathy Shrestha. Thank you, all the viewers and listeners and all the hosts who guest hosted for me the last 3 weeks. I'm so grateful to everyone. And please tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Talk 4 TV or W4CY.com radio. And may we all have enriching conversations in diversity this week. Thank you for listening.
Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech